Today, my guest is former WWE developmental talent and third generation star, Mr. Max McGurk. Max, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm fantastic. Excited to be on your show.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
Absolutely.
So let me ask, where did professional wrestling come into your life?
Man, it started before my life started. So just a little background on me, and I don't know how much research you've done, but my grandfather was Leroy McGurk, and he ran a territory, the tri-state territory, like from the 50s up through the 70s. Ended up having a little fallout with Cowboy Bill Watts, and then that separated, and they did his territory, I think Mid South. Anyway, my grandfather was a national champion wrestler at Oklahoma A&M back in the 30s. It's now Oklahoma State University, and so it went from my grandfather to my mom, which is Mike McGurk. Funny story on that. People want to call her Michelle and that kind of stuff, but my grandfather wanted a boy. He didn't get one, so he named her Mike anyway. And that transition went from, his professional wrestling days, and then the opportunity set forth. I want to say in '85 for my mom. She was carrying the ring. I remember like we had a wrestling ring and on a trailer. We did all the house shows and stuff like that. That was before I was born. So anyway, I was kind of born into it, and so I was in the locker rooms all the time as a kid. Matter of fact, I think I got held back my first grade year because I think I missed 82 days of school. So I was just, Macho Man and Hulk and all those guys, man, they were like my aunts and uncles, like all the stars. So it was really cool growing up.
So yeah, what was that like being around that experience? Because people on TV versus this is who you're seeing every week. That's a little bit different for a perspective from your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, like Ric Flair, I got a picture of him when I was in middle school. He'd come up to Tulsa. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He'd come up for Tulsa because we had Tulsa Nationals, which was one of like the largest amateur wrestling, tournaments, events that we would have. So I grew up around him and his kids and that kind of stuff. And so it was, man, it was normal to me. So like if my friends would say, hey, wrestling is going to be in town, a lot of them would call and ask for a hookup or tickets or whatever, but it was just normal to me. I grew up. Bret the Hitman Hart was my favorite as a kid, and it was normal. I remember walking out to the ring in Memphis. I want to say the Coliseum, whatever they had, like the big pyramid building. And I remember Sergeant Slaughter and Hacksaw Jim Duggan were tagging, and they had me carry the American flag with them. But man, it was an amazing experience. But that was normal. That was like, I'm not going to say everyday life, but it was pretty cool growing up.
So, what age did you decide that professional wrestling was something that you were going to pursue?
Man, that's a great question. And my life and how my path went before, during, and after wrestling is kind of a testament to that. So I, growing up through wrestling, my mom was the ring announcer WWF from like 1985 when I was born, I think until 94, 95. They asked her to move to Connecticut, and that wasn't a choice. I mean, we were born and raised in Oklahoma. It's where I'm at now. And so I was probably 10 when she got off the road. She'd be gone 26, 27 days a month. I mean, she was gone all the time. And so when I got into middle school, high school, I'm not going to say I didn't watch it much, but it was suppressed. I was basically told like, hey, if you ever want to get into it, you got to get a college degree first, period. You got to get your education no
Hmm.
matter what. And so, you say what age? 2007, I started catching up with Jim Ross. I started catching up with Booker T, um, because my mom told me, she's like, it was kind of one of those things. You get your degree, you can go do whatever you want. So I got a bachelor's in accounting. I graduated in 3.5 years, and so I remember the day that I graduated. It was a Saturday. There was a gentleman named Tom Jones. Tom Jones used to work for my grandfather. He was one of the first black men in the Midwest territory. And my mom calls him and he says, I got to train Max. I got to train Leroy's grandson. And so December '07, I started training. It probably 5, 6 months from there, I was on the road and I was hitting anything within 8 hours. I was hitting any independent I could find. So to answer your question, I was probably about 20. Uh, my mom still had connections. She'd text Shane and he'd respond. He'd be like, where you at? meet you at the back door. And so we were at, shows, and it just really reignited that fire. It never went away, but I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and so, yeah, I was probably about 20 years old, and, yeah, pretty wild.
So how was it working those independent shows? Was it what you thought it would be?
Man, I had a really open mind about it.
Hmm.
I knew where I was going. I know when I graduated college, um, I went straight to the Independence. And the funny part about it, you get to the Independence. We worked at this one place. It was the Golden Goose. It's just literally a flea market. And I remember thinking, like, okay, there's a lot of like people that are out of shape, that don't look, like wrestlers. They don't look like they could beat you up. And then I'd come out and I get a good reaction. I'm like, okay, all right, I take care of my body. I work out, and I was an amateur wrestler from 5 years old till I graduated high school. I didn't pursue it in college because college was just like, hey man, let's just get your bachelor's degree,
Hmm.
get in and get out. So I didn't chase sports in college. Don't think I wish I would have. I mean, it just wasn't on my radar. And so the independence, I knew it was just a matter of cutting my teeth. And so, out of Tulsa, I was working in Oklahoma City, Houston, Arkansas, and man, I caught I was paying attention to everybody, Booker T. I ran into Joe. I knew Joe as a kid, Joe Hennig, and he started training with, oh gosh, Ted DiBiase Jr., and Mike DiBiase, and they were with Harley. And I ran into a couple shows with them in Missouri, and Harley's like, come train with me. And I'm like, I'm trained. I'm just wanting to jump on some shows. And that connected me to Mike DiBiase. So Mike DiBiase got me into Amarillo, Texas. That'd be a 6-hour drive from Tulsa. And so, man, it was, when I graduated college, I already had a job. So I was an accountant for Oklahoma Natural Gas, a big company here in town. And I would get in the car at 5 o'clock, and I'd be wrestling 3 nights a week on the weekends, sometimes come back late. If I was in Amarillo, I'd come in later or take Monday off. But, man, I loved it. It was cutting my teeth. And I knew it was a step. It was a platform to something bigger. I knew in my heart I was going somewhere higher than where I was on the independent. So
So how long did you work the independents before you decided that WWE was something that you were going to pursue?
I knew the day I started the independence, WWE is what I was going to pursue. I knew it. And to be honest with you, if I was to roll back the clock, I got hired way too early. I was way too young. I was on the independence a year. So from my first match to being signed, I was on independence a year, and I was wrestling every weekend, but I was signed in a year. I started wrestling in '08, and by March of '09, back then we would record DVDs, and we were trying to get our DVDs out there. And Jim Ross, back in the day, this is just to roll back some story here. Jim Ross got his start with my grandfather, as a referee. He was, Jim was from Westville, Oklahoma, and we would have the shows that would be going through Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And man, back in the day, like everybody wanted to be, I say everybody, many people wanted to be part of the wrestling. And so he got to start with my grandfather, and he moved up the ranks. Matter of fact, my grandfather was blind. And so he lost an eye when he was younger, and then he lost another one, his other eye, in a car accident, in I'd say the 50s, right? And so Jim got, from not only refereeing and booking and all that kind of stuff, but then he was the driver for my grandfather. So he learned the business inside and out. And so he was the first one I reached out to when I said, man, I think I'm ready. And so I went to his restaurant, dropped him some DVDs, and very, very close friend of the family. And he called me on my mom's birthday in 2009 in March and said, hey, listen, there's a tryout in Tampa, Florida. It's at FCW. You got to pay your way. This is no free ride. There's going to be 100+ people there. Good luck. And he tried to tell me, he said, man, he said, back in the day, he said, this is way different. He said, WWE now is way different than it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. He said, this is a different world. And he tried to stress that. He's like, back in the day, you could be, a Lanny Poffo and be a good hand, and you're always going to have a job.
Hmm.
But these days, man, like it's just way, way different. So, we can get into that story if you want to.
Yeah.
Yep. So I get the call. Jim calls me, March of 2009, and I'm just in my mind. I'm like, I'm there. Here we go. And so anyway, it was the first week of May. It was hellacious, man. So we get into FCW where I would later be, and we get in there and it's just punishing. I mean, just
Hmm.
black eyes, busted lips, but you got monster people, and you're just like, this is insane. I mean, it was wild. I met quite a few people there, and out of 100 people, Fred Rosser and AJ Lee and myself were the ones that got hired out of that tryout. So it really, really incredible time. It was probably about a month later. I get a phone call from a Connecticut phone number, and they said we need you here in 2 weeks. So I had to go talk to my corporate accounting job and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go do something wild and quit my job and packed whatever I could in a truck and drove to Tampa, Florida. So
So how was that tryout? Did they really push you to see if this is something you wanted to do? And who was the trainers that headed up this
yeah,
tryout?
man, so we had Billy Kidman, Norman Smiley, Dr. Tom Pritchard. I mean, I love that man. Steve Kern. And one thing about Steve Kern was the best man to my mom's first wedding to Brian Blair. So there was already some knowledge and some familiarity there. Yeah. So, man, it was incredible. I remember they would put us, I can't remember the exact hours, so somebody might call me on this, but it was probably 6 or 8 hours of just brutal beating. I mean, it was endurance and strength and run of the ropes and just getting slammed 100 times. And I remember I went back to my hotel, and it was probably 5 o'clock in the evening. I ate a $5 foot long Subway, and I was asleep at 5 because I knew the very next morning don't be late. And so anyway, it was intense. And I remember thinking like, wow, like this is what professional sports is all about.
Hmm.
Yep.
So you said you moved within 2 weeks. So what was your initial impression of WWE developmental? Because this is pre-performance center. This is a warehouse.
Yeah, it's a warehouse. Yep, yep. So you had four rings, all right next to each other. After I was there, they had built in like a little trainer's room, and then you had the main room in the auditorium, I guess you'd call it, where the fans would go and we'd shoot TV once every 3 weeks. Um, I was you're kind of like, man, is this what it is? It's a studio. You had a hard cam that was sitting there that was always, it seemed like it was always on. But it was you knew like if I get past this, I mean, it's Hollywood,
Hmm.
But it was one of those things, man. It was a grind. It was a lot of work. I can't tell you enough. It was a lot of work. You had, uh, gosh, Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays, we'd have shows on the weekends and stuff like that. It was a lot of work. I can't tell you enough. The other side of it is this. I don't think I told you this, and we'll get into this in a minute. I had bought my first house while I was in college. I paid for it in cash, saved it all up. Oklahoma's a cheap, inexpensive place to live. So I bought my first house, and then it was probably a month or two before I got hired by WWE. I bought my second house. So one became rental, one became my house, and then I'd take the phone call, and I'm in Florida. So I had other stuff, other business going on, and so when I get there, you sign a big contract, and they say you are not an employee, but you're an independent contractor, but you can't have any other job. So what they paid you, whether it paid the bills or not, I mean,
Hmm.
you can't do anything else. I can't go wait tables or anything like that in the off time. And there really wasn't an off time. You work 24/7. So it was something that I had to get used to. But everybody kept it in the back of their mind. If I succeed past this, my wildest dreams are going to be met.
Hmm. Did they
So
know what they wanted to do with you when you got there, or were they going to acknowledge who your mom was and who your grandfather was, or were you just going to go? This
yeah,
is
no, absolutely not. And I think that was kind of the same thing because when I was down there, you got Joe Hennig, you had Brett DiBiase, you had the Usos were down there. So I was down there. I think Jay was there, and then Jonathan came right after. So I mean, we had Tavita, right? He was there.
hmm.
Uh, they just an incredible amount of talent and people that I knew. Cody had already made the main roster. He was hot shotted because in '07 when I started going to some of the shows, talking to Mark Eaton and quite a few of the guys, Cody was already quickly right through developmental and went right, right
Hmm.
to dark matches. And so to go back to, did they have an idea what to do with me? No, absolutely not. Most of the guys, they didn't have any clue. You had Abraham Washington doing his shtick, and he was awesome. I love that dude.
Hmm.
But on the flip side of it, I had Dusty Rhodes that I knew as a kid, and so Dusty knew my grandfather very well. I pitched the idea of like kind of an announcer gimmick or something like that. Mr. Kennedy was doing his microphone from the top at the time. So it was just a lot of throwing ideas until something stuck.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, like I told you, I was wrestling on the independents. I already had gear. All my gear had McGurk on the back, right? So if you saw any pictures or any videos or something like that, my first, few first couple months there, everything said McGurk on the back, right? So then Dusty pulls me aside and says, "Hey man, corporate says we got to change your name," and so he just, yeah, and I'm just like, no, why take that? And so anyway, so he kept throwing a bunch of different stuff at me, and he came up with Leroy Morgan, right? So he came off my grandfather's first name, but didn't recognize my last name. And man, it was tough, man. It's really tough to get traction when they just really don't have a lot that they can
Hmm.
talk about of you and that kind of stuff. So I had to quickly get new gear. Dos Caras,
Hmm.
he was a really close friend. So his grandfather knew my grandfather. So there's a lot of like just cohesiveness there. So we were really really good friends, and I haven't talked to him in a few years. But man, uh, old Alberto Patron, man, wonderful guy.
So
So
go ahead.
yep, go for it. No, no, I was just going off of Dusty. What a wonderful man. God,
Hmm.
it was so much fun on Wednesdays. Getting to go out there and cut promos. You had 60 seconds to just light him up. And it was just, God, what a national treasure that man was.
So a lot of people I've talked with, like if you were a second or third generation person, they'd be like work like your mom, work like your dad, and then when you get that down, they're like, okay, now don't do it. Now don't dress
Yeah,
like this.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
so like when they wanted you to change everything, like was that a common theme down there? Like they did, like you were saying, they didn't know what was going to stick.
Yeah, yep. And it was a weird transition if you think about it. When the PC happened, I've never been there, but when that whole thing changed, when Triple H kind of took that on his own, I think all of a sudden they're like, man, we really got to develop these guys. Because I mean, the sad part about it was, I'll never forget Alex Riley, man, great friend, wonderful wonderful dude. I remember it would be like once a month or something like that. You'd almost feel like we'd high five each other leaving on a Friday, like I might not see you on Monday type of deal.
Hmm.
And he's like, man, I've been around for a long time. And, so anyway, people kind of had that concept. You always had a revolving door of people coming in and out.
Hmm.
And so it was kind of one of those things. If you're not making WWE money right now, you're costing them money. And at some point, your number is going to get called. And so unfortunately, that's what happened with me. But it was tough, man. It was really tough to really gain some ground. And I think one thing that they did is they probably noticed that. They said, let's take a group of individuals and make this FCW something impressive.
Hmm.
And they pulled he was a tag partner for a little bit, but Fred Rosser, and they did the Nexus, which was incredible. But man, you had some great talent that were down there. You had Brett DiBiase, you had Wes Briscoe. We tagged quite a bit. Another wonderful name that WWE. I'm not going to say dropped the ball, but they, you know,
Hmm.
uh, Gerald Briscoe. I mean,
Hmm.
just some great names. And then some of the guys really really came out of there and did some great stuff. David Tunga, we had a lot of wonderful matches together. Another great friend. Great look. He made some waves on the main roster. But yeah, man, it's tough, especially when you're constantly throwing
Hmm.
ideas to creative and you're just not getting anything. It is a little discouraging.
Do you think that they signed too many people at that point in time for the facility that they had? Do they have enough trainers versus talent? Because now it seems like longevity is the key, but like when you were there, it's like we've got another one, we've got another one. You
Yep.
get one chance, it doesn't work. And that's how developmental was forever. It wasn't longevity. It was we've got
Yep.
30 more guys down here. We'll
Yep.
see what works.
Yeah, and I think they've constantly got the feelers out to other people, right? So I mean, like people will say, "Oh, were you down there when Seth Rollins was?" Or all these different names. I mean, like when I got released right after me, then you had like Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, all those
Hmm.
guys came in after Brian Danielson, all those guys came in right after. So it's like somebody, Ty Bailey or somebody had feelers out to those guys saying, hey, once we release a couple more people, then you guys can fill in. Cause I'm sure they probably had a certain amount of people they could have on
Hmm.
contract at one time. It felt like when I was down there, I don't remember the exact number, probably around 60, 75 people, something like that. But yeah, it definitely felt like it was a revolving door. And I think it makes more sense to have, some talent. I think I was signed to a 2 or 3 year contract. I can't remember. It's been 15 years, 15 years. And so I think it makes more sense to kind of give some of these guys some
Hmm.
time, like let them develop because that's why we're down there. Um, and so, yeah, I think some people, they either quickly see, hey, this guy's not going to,
Hmm.
cut the mustard or whatever. So,
Is there any particular moments that stand out more than others during your time in FCW?
times stand out. Man, there's a picture I've got. We collectively came up with a shirt that said "Wants It," right, and it goes around Facebook with some of the friends. But it was a theme that came up through one of our promo shows with Dusty, and that was a great moment to just be able to go through those pictures and see some of the guys that were with us. I mean, heck, Brian Cage, I thought he was one of the best before I got hired when I was at the tryout. I'll never forget Kalen Croft and Brian Cage were a tag team, and they were incredible. And I'll never forget watching. One day Brian Cage was gone, right, and now he's like the biggest, most
Hmm.
jacked dude. Like I love that guy. And I think he probably, in my mind, he probably got so jacked and so big. I want to be the biggest star to spite what happened to
Hmm.
him in development. You know what I'm saying? And that's
Hmm.
that's just coming from me. Um, and so best moments. I got a picture with Drew McIntyre and a bunch of us. Lance Hoyt, really really close friends. And we went to a Tampa Bay Lightning game, and it was just a great time to be alive.
Hmm.
Loved every moment that I was out there. There was I think PJ had talked about a Halloween party that Bo and Duke Rotundo threw. And it just got so much fun. I don't know. I wished it would have lasted forever. It was
Hmm.
just so much fun just to be around the guys. A moment that will last forever. Heath Slater. I was about to wrestle. I can't remember what town we were in Florida, but I was about to wrestle. I had my new trunks on that Dos had got me from Mexico, and I'm about to wrestle Lance Hoyt. Lance Hoyt was 6 inches taller than me, big jack dude, and I'm about to come through the curtain. We're at an armory, and they go to shove me out, and Heath Slater grabs my trunks, dumps a bunch of ice in the back of my pants, and I get shoved through the curtain, right? And everybody's ripping people and just having a good time. And I'll never forget, Lance is in the ring waiting for me. He's just going to pummel me, right? So he clotheslines me and ice shoots out everywhere. He picks me up with a body slam. Ice is shooting out of the front of the crowd. I mean, those are some fun memories that I've got.
when when your release came, was it something that you thought was going to happen, or did you see it coming? Was it just out of
Man,
nowhere?
um, so I had some concussions, right? So I had one really bad concussion. I was wrestling Tarver. Fred Rosser and I were tagging together. We were in St. Petersburg, Florida, and one move was called. Something else happened. Tarver drops me on my head, and I'm out, completely gone. Right? Go to cover. He's not moving. Fred, comes in, gets the DQ finish, and Fred took me to the hospital, and it was bad. And at that point, you go through the concussion protocols, and about every 30 minutes, 30, they try to go 25, 30 days, put you back to the ring. I was on a TV show, TV match. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. You had him on not long ago. We were tagging together, hit a drop kick, head hits the mat, bell rung, gone, just stuff like that. And so I knew at that point there was a couple of concussions. I was wrestling with David Tunga in an auto mall and I had another concussion. I knew like kind of the writing was probably going to be on the wall just because so much time of being out. I did some time with Stu Bennett doing the commentating or whatever for some of the
Hmm.
FCW shows, so I knew that was coming. I think I felt it coming. I was really close. I don't know if you've ever heard the name, but Alfred Barunda. Alfred, he was the guy that would do all the marketing and stuff. Wonderful man. We were still great friends. We'll get into a business that he and I co-own. We own an ice cream shop in St. Petersburg, Florida, right now. It's been wonderful. It's been open a little over 2 years. He's been a great friend from the moment that I started, even up to today. He's is a lifelong friend. Did I see it coming? Like I told you, I think all of us knew. I think I had high fived Kevin Kiley
Hmm.
and said, "Hey man, hope to see you Monday." And he's like, "I don't know, man. I've been here for a long time. You might not see me." And I got the phone call, and it was kind of one of those things. I think Ty Bailey, I want to say, was the guy who called me, um, and was like, "Hey man, don't know if we got a creative direction for you. Maybe come back in 6 months." And so that's how it went, and it was a little bit of a shocker. I was 24 years old. It was, you know, scary, but also
Hmm.
like, man, what's next? You know?
So
So
what was next? Did you pursue professional wrestling thinking that, you were eventually going to go back like he recommended?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Man, I get back home. I called every promoter, like just like when I got started, I was hitting all these shows. And I think most of the promoters like, man, this guy's come back, get bigger, get better. Cause that was the other thing too, man. When we were down there, I was probably the same size as PJ,
Hmm.
in terms of, size, height and that kind of stuff. But man, we had some really, big dudes. We had Kyle Rasmussen, we had Aaron, I'm trying to remember what Aaron's last name was. He was huge. They were big jack dudes that were, models in
Hmm.
LA and not great wrestlers, but they look good on TV. And so a lot of the guys, they tell us, man, you got to get bigger, you got to get bigger. And it's when your frame's only going to take on 215, 220, it's hard to get to 240, and so anyway, in my mind, I went home. I was just ate like crazy. I was hitting a Independence, three times a week, and I ran into Vader's kid,
Hmm.
Jesse White, and we had incredible matches. And I think it made me a better wrestler because I'm like, I was a heel and I
Hmm.
was a babyface most of the time when I was in Tampa at FCW. And so we had incredible matches. I was doing 450s. I mean, from one side of the ring to the other. I mean, it forced me to be a better wrestler. And lo and behold, he gets signed, and I was like, that's awesome, And so we would stay in touch. He's like, man, you got to come back out here. He wanted me to come back, and for whatever reason I wrestled, and I for whatever reason I didn't call back, and
Hmm.
I don't know if it was they're going to call me, which
Hmm.
there was no reason. I'm not the best talent in the world, right? I'm an average wrestler, and the other side of it was, maybe there's maybe this isn't for me,
Hmm.
and so I never called him back. I stayed in touch a year later, in 2011. So I was there in 2009 and 2010. Uh, 6 months, 8 months later, they were going to do the Tough Enough deal. And so I sent in a video. Ty Bailey and I spoke again. So they sent me out to California for, I can't remember, a week, 10 days. Didn't make the show. And, ran into some other good friends. And that was kind of the last of it. After that, I'm not going to say I lost the luster for it, but I didn't chase it,
Hmm.
I think they were in town in Tulsa one year. I think probably around 11. It was around when I was doing the Tough Enough thing. And I saw Alex Riley and a couple of my friends. It was just really good to see those guys. Um, and I didn't pursue it, you know? And I think in my mind, I liked, and this is just my life, right? I
Hmm.
like, um, I like to be sure of what's in front of me, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I want to know when I wake up tomorrow, I got a job, I got a roof over my head, I got meals on the table and that kind of stuff. And I think the constant fear of, am I going to lose my job tomorrow? Is somebody not going to be happy with my match, right? Did I not lay in a punch, hard enough on Sheamus, for the TV show? I mean, those were probably the constant things. Those are probably the things that I struggle with the most. We go out and have a match. I thought 5-star match, man. Not Kalen Croft, Dude Busters, Trent Beretta. We'd have a wonderful match,
Hmm.
and I come back. I'm like, yeah, and whoever was the agent of your match was like, that was the worst crap I've ever seen in my life, right? And then
Hmm.
I'd go out there and have a match where I just literally felt like I crapped the bed, and they were like, why haven't you been doing that the whole time you've been here? It's all like, and it was, I like to know, I'm trying to remember the word for it, but, not security, but like, I like to know for sure, I got a job and
Hmm.
a place to go tomorrow. And so I think that's probably why I never called back and I never continued to pursue. So going into that, I get released, the tough enough thing, all that kind of stuff. Uh, I wanted some freedom because we never had freedom, man. We were, I don't know if
Hmm.
anybody ever told you this, but it's like, uh, your job was WWE, right? Your job was developmental. You can't go can't do anything else. You can go home if you want to, but you don't have a job, So like, there was some brief time, like maybe Christmas or Thanksgiving, you might be able to go home, but like, you can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to go get
Hmm.
married for a week or whatever." I mean, maybe you could if you had good pool, but like, your job is this. And so, when I got back home, I was still wrestling on the weekends, and I became a school teacher. I taught high school for 5 years, and that gave me security. It gave me, I got a paycheck. As long as I show up, I work really hard, I'm going to have a paycheck. I still wrestle on the weekends, and eventually my kids started seeing YouTube,
Hmm.
and it was Max the Wrestler, and so it was kind of wild. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, I never went back. I've stayed in touch with quite a few friends. A year ago, Lance Wood, hadn't talked to him probably since developmental. He called me. He's in Texas, and he said he was buying some wheels for a Corvette. And so I picked up the wheels here in town and met him up, and we had a couple hours lunch and caught up. Uh, Man, quite a few of them I still stay in touch with. Dylan Klein will still stay in touch. I don't go to independent shows really anymore.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, I got a niece who's she's a sophomore in high school. They just started female wrestling, so girls wrestling, about 4 years ago. I go to all her wrestling matches, all her tournaments. She's a fantastic wrestler. Hopefully she'll have a college program to go to. So I stay in touch on that. I'll pay attention to the product here and there, but the hard part with the current product right now is just I like to see my guys I was
Hmm.
with, McIntyre and that kind of stuff. So if he's got a segment, I'll watch that. But it just when there's the familiarity of the guys that you were
Hmm.
with there, that I don't watch it as much. Still love it. It still gives me butterflies and the excitement, just like you, man.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I never went back. Um, so
Did you ever think that maybe there was a different aspect that you could have pursued in professional wrestling? Because not everybody has your mindset, and I'm glad that you have that. It's all or nothing. And when
yeah,
you
yeah,
have that mindset, like sometimes you'll spiral badly.
yeah.
And I hate
No, no,
to
100%.
see other people like that.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. So a couple things that ran through my mind, right? There was some subconscious stuff like the concussion stuff, of why I don't go back. Um, the other side of it was, when I went to that tryout, I met Alfred, right? And I remember he wisecrack jokes, that kind of stuff. Couldn't really like feel his humor, but he pulled me aside and in the tryout before I ever got hired, and he says, "You got a bachelor's degree in accounting, right?" Yep. He said, "Why are you here?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Because I want to be the next WWE superstar. Like why is everybody else here? He says, "But you're educated. You don't need to do this." And I said, "You're right, but I'm going to. And so he's reiterated that because, like I said, I go to Tampa once a year, go visit. Yeah, I try to go more than that now that I got a business with him. But he'd say, "Man, you were college educated. You did your own taxes. Like you knew, a lot of things that most of these guys didn't. You had a background, it's something to fall back on, and that kind of stuff. And that's why, like I try to tell anybody, if you're going to get into wrestling, you got to have a college education. Just like you said, there's so many people in the independents. This is their only
Hmm.
shot, right? Otherwise, they're uh, they don't have a lot of options.
Hmm.
And so I think that was probably the thing in my mind is I've got other options, right? I gave it a shot when I was young. It's better than trying when you're 40, right?
Hmm.
Probably not an open door for you. I thought the door was closed at 30. And maybe it was, who knows? I never knocked on it again. Right. So, but yeah, there was that. And there was probably like the long-term, health effects, right? Cause I'm like,
Hmm.
Brett Favre last week says he's got Parkinson's. Brett Favre was like one of my idols watching football, and now the guy's probably going to be shaking or whatever for the rest of his life because he took a bunch of risks
Hmm.
when he was younger. And so I think some of my decision was quality of life going forward, and then the other side of it, like I said, is I for sure want to know
Hmm.
what my tomorrow is going to look like, and I guess we can roll into what I'm doing today if you
Yeah. So how's
would want
life
to know.
after wrestling?
Yeah, life after wrestling has been fantastic. So I told you I went back to school. I didn't go back to school, so I went back and taught school. So I taught for 5 years, and I think in my mind, uh, I'm not going to say tuck your tail and go back home, but you go back to where you've had success, right?
Hmm.
So WWE was getting that phone call was the first time I've ever been let go for anything, and in my mind, I called it a failure, right? Because if you aren't John Cena or Hulk Hogan, it's a fail in my mind. You didn't hit the pinnacle, right?
Hmm.
And so I come back home. I was kind of a beaten man, right? And I'm just like, how do I get my footing, right? So I taught school. I had another really, really good friend of mine that stayed in touch in Oklahoma. He worked as a part-time DJ or whatever, and so he asked me one time to borrow my truck. I said, look, I like to save money, so I bought some speakers and that kind of stuff. And we've had a DJ business since, I don't know, 2010, 2011. The thing makes incredible money. And we've got 6 guys that work for us. It's a fantastic business, 360 photo booths, digital, all kinds of stuff. We do tons of weddings and proms. It's a lot of fun. So I did that. Like I told you, I taught for 5 years. I'd probably buy a house every other year. So I've got right now, I sold a package of 35 houses. So I left teaching in 2016, started selling boats, and I am sitting on the back of a boat right now. So I'm in a boat store, and I'll tell you more about that here in just a minute. I'm a hardcore saver. I don't have any kids. I don't have any bad habits, and so I just started going crazy. And I bought a ton of real estate with actually the general manager of my boat store at the time. We bought 35 single family houses, kept them for I don't know 3-4 years, bought them at incredible prices, had them all rented. COVID happens. I just said, hey, would you mind if I sold these or put them up in the market? Sold them on Facebook, made a couple $1 million. And I was in my mind like all I was focused on was financial freedom, right? Like I
Hmm.
don't want to have a job. Sold all those, made a bunch of money, rolled out in a little over 1,000 apartment doors that pay us passively, and I stopped working 3 years ago. So I was 36 years old, didn't have to go to work anymore. Um, so I stopped selling boats. And just ever since then, I've bought 28 more houses here in town, and it's fun, it's enjoyable. I love real estate. Before we got jumped on this call, I was making a couple offers on a couple other pieces of property. Little things pop up like Alfred and I on the ice cream shop in St. Pete. If you get the chance, it's called Small Batch Creamery, right? It's on Fifth
Hmm.
Street in St. Petersburg. A lot of the boys, Alfred still stays in touch. I want to say Seth Rollins has been out there, and quite a few of the boys will stop in whenever they do a Raw in Tampa or whatever. So Small Batch Creamery, if you ever get the chance on Fifth Street, ice cream is fantastic. It is handmade by Alfred himself. So I do stuff like that. And about a month ago, I said, "Man, I'm tired of sitting on the couch." You said you just got a new house. I just
Hmm.
I just built my own house. So I spent the past 9 months prior to this as a general contractor. I built a couple houses before, but I built my house, moved into it in May, and I got tired of my girlfriend saying, "What are you doing tomorrow?" Because I'd say nothing. I don't play golf, and so I said I got to go back to work and do something I love, and I absolutely love boats. So I sell boats for a company called Nichols Marine in Tulsa, and it's a joy, man. I got to wake up and get excited to go jump on an
Hmm.
entertainment type of industry. So that's what I do now. So I buy a bunch of real estate. I stay in shape, not like I was when I was in developmental, but just glamour muscles. So
If you had
yep.
any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling or just life in general, what would that be?
Yeah, man. If you're deciding to get into professional wrestling, I think you got to know every single thing about it, right? You got to know inside and out. I had an advantage because I was an amateur wrestler, right? So I knew holds and different techniques. I was somebody I didn't get gassed very often because you got to have the endurance to go, all 3 periods, and so I think you got to know inside and out. When I started training, I ran down in Houston, ran into Book. There was another guy named Tugbuck Taylor He was running a independent territory down there, and I remember when I was like, I'm going to get into this, and so the guys wanted to test you, right? They're like, oh, you
Hmm.
think you're an amateur wrestler? Man, I'm telling you, like, I was a 21-year-old kid, and I was making some big adults tap because they weren't fast and they didn't know what they were doing. So I think you got to be well rounded in terms of not just professional wrestling, and I think you got to know the history. You got to
Hmm.
know deep inside and out, not just what's going on right now. You got to know 15 years ago, 30 years ago. You got to know the stories and how to entertain people, right?
Hmm.
The other side of it is you got to be outside of the box. I was a kid that was pretty shy, and I had to open up and have a personality, right? Because I mean, think about when you walk out in front of 1,500 people. And you're the star of the show. It's you and one other guy. Like you gotta be on. You gotta
Hmm.
get the crowd behind you. So that's one thing. The other side of it, I would tell, just like I was told, and I'm thankful I did it. If I would have just went right out of high school straight into pro wrestling, and this is my only, opportunity, um, I would tell anybody and everybody, go get a 4-year bachelor's degree. Go if you don't want to do college, go to HVAC school. Be air conditioning, plumbing, electricity, whatever. I mean, I pay those guys more than I ever made in a salary. And I would do something like that so you have something to fall back on.
Hmm.
Wrestling is one of those things. You only have so many years that you can do it, right? Not
Hmm.
everybody can be 50 or 60 years old. In order to wrestle in your 50s and 60s, you got to be incredible in your 30s,
Hmm.
and maybe into your 40s, right? John Cena is about to retire, and he's what, mid 40s, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
You can only be on top for so long, and he was incredible in his early 20s, and not everybody gets that option, and some of us die young,
Hmm.
unfortunately. Bray, God rest his soul, one of the best guys I ever met. But you just never know when your card's going to get called.
Hmm.
Education, man, education, have something to fall back on. Because if you think about this is what I try to tell people. Um, um, 30 teams, 32 teams, I can't remember. And on each one of those teams, you got what, 53 men. I mean, you got
Hmm.
tons and tons of people. In wrestling, you have NXT and you got the main roster,
Hmm.
and you got to be the top of the top, and you got to be on all the time, and you wrestle, the full year. You don't get as much time off as the guys in the NFL and stuff like that. So that just means there's less people that are able to be at the top. So yeah, education. You have something to fall back on, because wrestling, not all the time are you going to have a 20-year career.
Absolutely. I just want to say
Yeah,
thank you for taking a little time out today to come on the podcast and talk about your time. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling. I truly appreciate your time today. I'm sorry it took so long
awesome.
to get together.
Oh man, no apologies at all, dude. I'm Brian. I'm excited for what you're doing. I love getting to watch all the podcast and the clips and all the great people that you're bringing on. The Brandon Grooms, the PJs,
Hmm.
Brian Breakers. I mean, those are all really, really good friends of mine. So it's really, really cool to see this. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. If there's ever anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
I'll do it, man.